In a small, cold town where winters seemed longer than dreams, there lived a poor little girl named Karen. She had no warm home, no beautiful dresses, and no one to admire her. But she had something that many richer people did not, an aching heart full of longing. She longed not only for comfort, but for beauty. In a world that had given her so little, she clung to tiny things that made life feel brighter. The color of flowers in spring, the shine of sunlight on windows, and most of all, the sight of pretty shoes in shop windows. Karen's clothes were simple and worn, and her shoes were rough and old. Sometimes, as she walked through the streets, she would stop to stare at fine ladies passing by in elegant gowns, their polished shoes clicking against the stones. She would look down at her own feet and quietly wish, just once, to wear something lovely. It was not just vanity. To Karen, beautiful shoes seemed like a promise that life could become beautiful too. Once upon a time, in a small village, lived a poor but beautiful little girl named Karen. She was so poor that in the summer she had to go barefoot, and in the winter, she wore big wooden clogs that chafed her ankles until they were red and sore. At the center of the village lived an old shoemaker's wife. She took pity on the girl and decided to make her a pair of shoes from old scraps of red cloth. They were a bit clumsy, but they were made with love, and Karen was overjoyed. She put them on for the very first time on the day her mother was buried. They weren't exactly mourning shoes, but they were all she had. As she followed the humble coffin, a large old carriage passed by. Inside sat a wealthy old lady who looked at Karen and her bright red shoes and felt a wave of compassion for the little orphan. What do you think happened next? Follow for part 2. Karen's life changed overnight. She was brought into a fine house, given good food, clean clothes, and a warm bed. For the first time, she knew comfort. The rich old lady was strict, but she intended to raise Karen well and give her a future. She had Karen taught to read, sew, and behave like a proper young lady. Karen should have been grateful, and in many ways she was. But as she grew older, the old longing inside her did not disappear. It simply changed shape. The lady disliked the red shoes and thought them ugly and childish, so she had them thrown away. Karen obeyed, but she never forgot them. The memory of those bright shoes stayed in her mind like a spark that would not die. Years passed, and Karen grew into a beautiful girl. She was admired for her face, her grace, and her charm. People praised her wherever she went, and slowly, dangerously, she began to love being admired. She no longer wanted beauty only for comfort. She wanted it for attention. She wanted eyes to turn toward her. She wanted to be seen. When the time came for Karen to be confirmed in church, the old lady bought her fine new clothes. Karen was also taken to a shoemaker to choose proper shoes for the occasion. There, among many polished pairs, Karen saw them a pair of shining red shoes. They were richer and more elegant than the old shoes of her childhood, but to her they carried the same irresistible magic. She wanted them instantly. The shoemaker admired how lovely they looked on her, and Karen looked at herself wearing them and felt a thrill she could not explain. The old lady, whose eyesight was poor, did not notice how bold and unsuitable the shoes were for church, so Karen was allowed to take them. On the day of her confirmation, Karen wore the red shoes proudly. As she walked into the church, she should have been thinking of solemn vows and sacred words, but her mind kept drifting downward to the shining red shoes on her feet. She could feel people noticing them. She could almost hear their thoughts. Even inside the quiet holiness of the church, Karen's heart was not lifted upward. It was pulled toward herself. Outside, an old soldier with a strange gleam in his eyes bowed before her and said of the shoes, "What beautiful dancing shoes," as he brushed the dust from them. It seemed to Karen as though something unseen passed into the leather. After that day, the shoes began to hold a power over her. At first, it was only a desire. Karen found excuses to wear them again and again, even when she knew she should not. She wore them to gatherings, to walks, to places where simpler shoes would have been more proper. Each time she wore them, she felt both guilty and delighted, and each time the pull of the shoes grew stronger. Then one evening, at a grand dance, Karen put on the red shoes and stepped into the hall. Music filled the air, and candlelight sparkled like stars. The moment she began to move, she felt lighter than ever before. She danced beautifully. People watched her with admiration, and Karen felt herself bloom beneath their gaze. She spun and smiled and forgot everything else. But when the music ended, her feet did not stop. At first she laughed, thinking she had simply lost herself in the dance. But the laughter quickly faded. Her feet kept moving. Faster and faster they went, carrying her across the floor, through the doorway, and out into the dark night. Karen was terrified. She tried to stop, tried to grab at walls and trees, but the red shoes danced on as if they had a will of their own. They carried her down lonely roads, through muddy fields, and into the deep forest. Branches tore at her dress. Stones bruised her feet. Her breath came in sobs, and still she danced. The moon watched silently from above as Karen spun beneath it, helpless and exhausted. Again and again, she passed places where people lived and prayed and slept, but she could not enter rest. The shoes would not let her. Whenever she neared a church, where she might have sought mercy, they forced her to whirl away. Whenever she tried to cry for help, her voice broke beneath the pounding rhythm of her own steps. Day blurred into night, and night into day. Karen no longer felt beautiful. She no longer cared who saw her. The very shoes she had once loved had become instruments of torment. Her pride, once fed by admiration, was now shattered by suffering. She was no longer dancing for joy. She was dancing because she was cursed. At last, worn down by fear and grief, Karen came to the house of an executioner in a lonely place. With tears streaming down her face, she begged him for help. She told him she could not go on, that she would rather lose her feet than dance another step in those terrible shoes. It was a dreadful request, and a dreadful mercy. The executioner did as she asked, and though the red shoes were cut away with her feet still in them, they did not stop dancing. They danced off into the distance, carrying with them the pride, vanity, and foolish desire that had ruined her peace. Karen was left broken, ashamed, and in pain beyond words. Kind people later fitted her with wooden feet and crutches, and she learned to live again in hardship. But now her suffering had changed her. No longer did she dream of being admired. No longer did she chase bright things to fill the emptiness in her heart. She had learned, through sorrow, how dangerous it can be to love appearances more than goodness, and attention more than truth. Still, her punishment was not only in the loss of her feet, it was in the memory of what she had become. Whenever she wished to enter a church and seek comfort, she imagined the red shoes dancing before her, mocking her weakness, reminding her of the vanity that had led her astray. Shame kept her at a distance. She felt unworthy of peace. So Karen lived quietly and humbly. She worked where she could. She listened when others spoke. She prayed from afar when she could not bring herself closer. And over time, the proud girl who once craved glances and praise began to disappear. In her place grew someone gentler, sadder, but wiser. One day, after long suffering and sincere repentance, Karen felt something she had not known in many years, a stillness in her heart. It was not the thrill of being admired. It was not the excitement of beauty. It was something deeper and quieter. It was grace. For the first time, she understood that true beauty had never been in red shoes or fine clothes or the eyes of strangers. True beauty lived in humility, kindness, and a heart made soft by compassion. The thing she had searched for in shining leather had always belonged to the soul. And in that understanding, Karen found the peace that had once seemed forever beyond her reach. Her story remained a sorrowful one, remembered not because of a pair of pretty shoes, but because of the painful truth they revealed, that when desire rules a heart, even the loveliest things can become chains. But when pride is broken and the soul turns back toward what is good, even a life marked by suffering can still find life. And so Karen, who had once wanted only to be admired, became instead a quiet lesson to the world, a reminder that not every glittering thing is a blessing, and not every loss is the end of grace.